Hi, this is Kurt, the Bariatric Carnivore. Well, Dr. Marty Makary has put out another really good book called Blind Spots that I really would recommend you listen to or read, or whatever you like to do. I'm one of those guys. I'd like to listen to Audible books, and I listened to this, and I've listened to it twice because I think it is just outstanding. And in this book, he points out something that I have been talking about for a long time, which is how the medical system itself behaves almost psychopathically, with a casual disregard for your health. The system looks after itself. It doesn't necessarily worry about you and your own individual health. The medical system in the United States is utterly fantastic when it comes to acute injury. When you've got a broken leg, when you've been in an auto accident, when you've had a gunshot, they are fantastic. But when it comes to getting you healthy, they really are not all that great. And he points out some great examples that really should give you pause before taking advice on health from your doctor, the medical establishment, or the media. And a couple of examples of that. One of them was the great peanut allergy that happened back around 2000 or so, and it went on for almost a decade, where a whole generation of kids got peanut allergies. And the reason why this happened was there was a small group in the UK that kind of recommended, without any evidence, that kids should not be exposed to peanuts until after the age of 2. And then the American Academy of Pediatrics picked up the recommendation. It got spread far and wide in all the media, and people quit giving their kids peanuts. And as a result, the kids weren't exposed, and by the time they did get exposed to peanuts later on, many of them had really horrible allergies to it. I mean, so bad that they needed to run around with EpiPens. It was becoming a catastrophe if some kid brought a peanut butter sandwich to school. You had signs up at church that if there was anybody that was no peanuts allowed in here. They banned peanuts from airplanes. It was just horrible. And the kids that had the allergy it was a serious thing. I mean, it was a life-threatening thing, and it was real, but it was preventable. See, the way you prevent getting peanut allergies is to expose your kids to peanut butter right after they start doing solid food. And if you just a little bit of exposure to peanut butter takes care of the whole problem, and most of us grew up with that. And as a result, there weren't very many people with peanut allergies. But they just went hog wild because there was no exposure for that whole generation of kids. And once they did the research, and the research had been out there for almost 5 to 7 years, that the recommendation was wrong, the American Academy of Pediatricians pushed back against it because their prestige was on the line. They didn't want to tell people they had given bad advice. And it took a while before everybody quietly quit recommending it and things got back to normal. But you got a whole generation of kids that have peanut allergies, and they're going to have them for the rest of their lives unless they go through some rather painful treatments to overcome it. That's one example. The worst one was what Fauci did to the blood supply during the HIV/AIDS time, when it was really expanding and becoming a problem. And it became pretty darn clear to this one doc in San Diego that it was a bloodborne disease, because the people that he was seeing that had it were homosexuals and intravenous drug users. And that's what was passed. That was the group that was passing it along. But he was out running, and he noticed in a line of people that were giving blood or selling plasma were some of his patients. And he started pushing for trying to actively discourage people that were HIV positives from giving blood. And it was Fauci that said, no, you can't do that because you're going to undermine faith in the blood supply system. And people are going to not want to donate blood because they're scared that if they give blood, they're going to get AIDS. And as a result, that recommendation was pushed to the side. And it was almost a decade before the test for the antibodies was allowed to be used, and before they started actively discouraging people that were at high risk of HIV from donating blood. And this had nothing to do with public health. This had everything to do with maintaining an institution. And as a result, we lost a whole generation of kids who had a disease where their body couldn't make the platelets. They needed lots of blood. They were getting monthly blood transfusions. And as a result, they died off. We lost a whole generation of kids because of that particular decision. Arthur Ashe, tennis great and civil rights humanitarian, died of HIV, AIDS, because he had heart surgery and got a bad batch of blood. There's a bunch of people that were harmed and died because of this institutional blind spot. And we see this happening too much. And he's got some great examples. And read the book and you'll see some of those examples of some of the great suffering that has happened because of the blind spots within our medical profession, and because frankly we don't use our own common sense enough. I mean, you count at the end of the day. Your opinion does matter. You do not have to take everything that the media tells you or your doctor says when it comes to your health as holy writ. Doctors are just dudes and chicks that happen to have really good specific education in a particular area, but they're subject to blind spots too. And you have a right to do your own research. Doing your own research used not to be a bad thing. It was called reading. There's lots of great information out there. And frankly, there's a lot of it, yesterday's conspiracy theory is now today's dogma on too many different subjects. And we've seen that. I mean, if you haven't realized that after 2020, you weren't really paying attention during COVID, but it's there, and we've seen it happen too much over the last few years. And this fight for your health, man, you are all alone. But we can all be alone in this together, and that's what I'm trying to do, is help get you to realize that you do have a voice in this thing. You can find out a lot more information than you might think. Realize that, the American Heart Association 5 years ago or so removed their recommendation to avoid saturated fat in your diet. You may not be aware of it because they didn't publicize it, but it's in their guidelines. They don't think it's a nutrient of concern anymore, but they're not publicizing it because they talked about it for 50 darn years, and they don't want to say, well, we made a mistake for 50 years. Too many of these doctors and too many of these institutions in particular aren't willing to admit when they're wrong. And as a result, your health is at risk. So what do? Realize you're all alone in this. But we can all be alone in this together. And the more you start taking responsibility for your health, the better off you're going to be. This is Kurt, the Bariatric Carnivore. I try to put out a couple of messages each week. I will talk to you again soon.